Today's guests are two women who have each built yoga studios in London with very distinct identities and philosophies. First, we have Vanda Vucicevic. She is the founder of Down to Earth in Tufnell Park, North London. Originally from Sarajevo, Vanda moved to the UK during the Balkan War in the 1990s. Before studying design in Italy, and then you went on to graduate from Central St. Martin's College. Before opening Down to Earth in 2014, she spent more than a decade working across photography, publishing, and television, including a photography editor of Time Out Croatia, and documentary projects for the BBC. Down to Earth, where, hands up, I once taught for a long time, emerged from a desire to create something different from the large destination-style studios dominating London at the time. A neighborhood space completely rooted in thoughtful design, exceptional teaching, and genuine community. Thanks for coming, Vanda.
Thank you.
Also joining us today is Olivia Barata Cavalcanti, and she is the founder of Sahna. Olivia came to studio ownership from a very different world. Before opening her studio, she had an international career in public health, working across Europe, sub-Saharan Africa, and the US on obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease programs, including as a scientific director of the World Obesity Federation. She's originally from Rio de Janeiro and has lived everywhere from Rome to New York to Maputo. Olivia eventually found her way into hot yoga, first as a student and later as a studio owner. In 2025, she launched Sahna, creating a space inspired by her Latin roots. Warm, vibrant, welcoming, and grounded in the belief that movement should feel both joyful and transformative. Today's conversation, it's really about what it means to build spaces like these in modern London, the realities behind running a yoga studio, community, burnout, taste, teaching, business, and why these spaces still matter. Thank you for joining us both. Let's start with Vanda. There's this perception from the outside that running a yoga studio is calm and soulful work. What does the reality actually look like for you day to day?
Probably the opposite of that. I mean, there are moments of calm. I'd say definitely there are. You know, the idea is that when you come into a studio, you want it to appear calm and lovely and soulful, but in the background, we're working really hard. I think the big thing for me is that we have multiple jobs to do in the kind of, we're on reception, we're handling clients, we're handling teachers, we're doing social media, we're ensuring scheduling is on sorted, that the physical building is fine, that, we're checking if toilets are, in working order. So you've got many hats on, and that can be quite full on. But the biggest thing is just the managing people and talking to the public. I'd say that you're just in any one day having to deal with a lot of humans, and that's probably why it's more stressful than you would think when you're just coming to a class. And we're creating, we're working really hard behind the scenes to create this kind of calm atmosphere. I'd say that's definitely not a relaxing job, I'd say.
What do you think, Olivia?
I agree 100%. I think there is the logistics part, which in my case, it's a hot yoga studio. So you have that extra layer of everything needs to be clean, and it needs to be, you have to deal with the humidity and the mats, and, what's the solution that you use, and is it too sweaty? Is it smelly? So there's also that component. And I think, as you were saying, Vanda, just the people, because you are holding space for the clients, and some of them are coming with, heavy hearts. Some of them are coming because they need to be there for whatever reason. Then you have your staff, and you have your teachers, and, I have my cleaners. You have so many people that you have to be there for. And at the same time, creating this space where, and any client comes in, you give out this this is a safe space. You can let go, but inside they're like, do we have enough toilet paper? Is the heating okay, or is this working? So it's a lot.
Yeah.
Olivia, you had a studio in Primrose Hill, and last year, was it?
The 30th of January.
Okay, this year, it literally burned to the ground, and you lost everything. So I want to know, what was that like? What was that like in your head for those first 72 hours? And how on earth did you pivot so quickly to find another yoga studio in 9 days?
I think it was actually, it was my coping mechanism, because in a situation like this, so, I got a call, oh, there is a fire. And I remember thinking, it's like, oh, we'll have to cancel the event we have tomorrow, it's so annoying. There's going to be some, whatever, burn smell. I had no idea. It was this kind of devastating fire that I lost absolutely everything, couldn't save a single mat, nothing. And so, I had a couple of hours that you just have a good cry, and I had people on the street kind of stopping and hugging me. It was really, really bad, obviously. And then immediately I'm like, okay, I have 25 teachers that teach for me. I have 6 people in front desk. I have the cleaners. Like, I have people that I need to take care of. So let's go. And we started, my manager, I have the most fantastic studio manager. And 2 hours later, 2 hours after, the firefighters arrived, we were just calling places. And I think I saw maybe 35 different spaces, from stables to piano factories to church halls, everything, until we eventually actually found another studio in Primrose Hill. And she also another amazing person. She wanted to transition to something else, so it was a perfect timing for the both of us. So I was able to reopen 9 days later. And I think it's the coping mechanism. You kind of do, because otherwise, what are you going to do? You're just going to melt and be depressed and cry. And in those moments, I realized how much the practice of yoga actually help us in those moments, right? Like everything that we practice, the being centered, the being focused, in those moments where everything is literally, you're in the middle of a tsunami, you can somehow manage to be calm. So it was definitely kind of one of those life-changing moments, for sure. But I also found so much love. Yoga studios, Pilates studios, people that I've never heard from before reached out to me. You, Jenny, reached out to me. Like, people from all over. It's like, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? The clients, everyone was there, the teachers. So it was, in the tragedy, also a beautiful moment. And I think we have now a beautiful new home for Sahna, and probably this is the place where we're meant to be.
Vanda, I suppose you had your own crisis, right, with COVID, which
Yes.
was not dissimilar in that all of a sudden overnight, literally,
Yeah.
everything was just shut down. How did you cope with COVID as a studio owner?
It was tough. It was really tough. I think what I remember more than anything is sort of having to cancel, like pre-COVID, I feel like classes weren't cancelled very often. We sort of, you did everything not to cancel a class. It was very dramatic if a class was cancelled. And I remember having to cancel every single class on the schedule and not knowing, how long for, or it was, again, crying and just thinking, what it was really, it felt very profound. And then, waking up a few days later to having to kind of think, okay, well, that's gone. What now? We've got this audience, and how do we engage with them? But we didn't really have any online presence up to that point, nor did we have any skills in how to, and we were also competing against major international, online yoga and Pilates providers. We had a fantastic receptionist at the time who was really good at sound, and she sort of helped, and also was very willing to go and film some sort of classes with teachers. Obviously, you couldn't move around London, so we somehow managed to create some online content, which I don't think was incredibly sort of amazing quality, but it definitely helped keep people together, and that was really important. Community was massive at the time. I think people would sort of stick with us. Some people will continue to pay their memberships throughout COVID. I think it was defining. It was really defining in sort of, realizing that we were important to the community, that they were important to us. People would show up just to sort of see each other online, and a very, very tough time. And we were lucky as well that we moved our premises during COVID. The place we were in originally since 2014, we wouldn't have been able to stay in because it was too small. So we managed to negotiate a bigger space during COVID, which meant we could, survive. But yeah, really tough time, and loads of studios closed, and I'm very sort of grateful that we managed to kind of weather the storm.
Yeah. Well, that does beg the question for both of you. Did these experiences, different yet similar, change how you view resilience as a business owner, not just a yoga studio owner? Like, coming back from those two experiences that were so devastating to you both, you're still here.
Yeah, I think it's something weird when there's so much chaos and so much tragedy. There's also kind of a surrender and say, like, okay, there are things that I can't control. What can I do? And you kind of almost become super efficient because you focus on the things that really matter. I think that's important. And just understanding, in my case, I don't know about you, but also understanding that the studio is not about the walls, it's not about that physical space, is what you created, the classes that you have, the community that comes, the teachers, that world that you have created. So that for me was definitely important.
Yeah, same here. I think it was... it sort of made coming back all the more exciting. I think it was a tricky time. Things changed dramatically in the industry, but I think coming back and surviving felt really, people were just happy to be there. People were happy to be there in person. It was a really, for me personally as well, I sort of moved away from being in the studio all the time to moving away and getting a full-time manager, and that sort of changed things slightly for me from sort of being in the studio every single day to being in the studio once a week. And I think that, it's been a very interesting journey. And I think coming back, sometimes I look back and think, I didn't think we would be where we are today without COVID. It felt like a very sort of special time. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think for me it was the opposite. I think I was kind of managing the studio and I would go and take my class. But after the fire, when we reopen, I'm actually there all the time. Because, I want to be there. I want to make sure that I meet everyone that comes through the door,
to say thank you. Yeah.
Well, to say thank you, to welcome, to make sure everything is running okay. Like, I really want to be the face, and kind of take the glory and the blames. Is something not working? I'm right here. Let me know. Yeah. Which, it's not great all the time, but
I think, it'd be interesting. You have that experience as well at Mission, but it's sort of, I was in that position for sort of the first 6 years of Down to Earth, and then moved. Actually, I live in Brighton, so it just makes it impossible for me to be at the studio all the time. It was so painful not to have that when I moved. It was, it's such an important part of being a studio owner, that sort of excitement of sort of practicing with your teachers, being on the mat. I mean, the amount of classes I took with you, and it was just such a good time. So that took a while, that kind of distancing myself from that role. It allowed for other processes. There are other things that have been possible because I've stepped away. I've also got the most amazing manager, and that it's great to have somebody, share the kind of burden. I miss those days. I miss the everyday, the saying hello to people, and
But I suppose, both of you have built spaces, and I haven't been to Sahna yet, but I hear this from teachers that we also share in common, and Vanda, I know Down to Earth well, these spaces that feel genuinely emotionally connected to, like you're talking about. So I'm wondering, how do you protect community when you have to make difficult commercial decisions?
I think for me is about that, creating that space that feels true to myself, to what I want Sahna to be, and understanding that it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. London is big enough. Instead of trying to capture everyone and trying to be a blend of everything, just being authentic. This is what we are. This is what we do. And and if you like it, you will come and you will stay. And I think that's just trying to be more long-term rather than short-term. What's popular now? What do people want now? What's going on? Very, very easy example. When we moved over to So Studio at the beginning, we didn't have the heating system. I had to install that. So at the beginning, we're like, oh my God, people were going to get scared when we put on the heat. What if they don't like it? I'm like, we're a hot yoga studio. This is what we are. And, and obviously we would love for everyone to love it, but it's not for everyone. But if you like it and you like our kind of style and our teaching, our community, you will stay. And I think that's just being focused on what you do best. And there's space for everyone in London, so I'm not worried about that.
I think that definitely. I think being focused on what you're good at, following what the trends are, making sure that you're constantly entertaining your clients, but at the same time sticking to what you know best. I think for sure. The other thing for us that's been really fundamental is reception. So it's slightly going back to me doing it initially, and now my manager Emma doing it. I feel that. Contact with the students is essential. I think you come into the studio, and when I lived in London, and now Emma and all the other people who worked at Down to Earth over the years, they often lived in the area. So there's that knowing, there's the sort of oh, have you been to the ponds, or have you seen that, and did you check out the new cafe? There's that sort of community, so that people feel that they haven't just come in to sort of sit quietly on the mat, not kind of chat to anyone. That they know people from local restaurants, from schools. The manager is part of that, and the reception is part of that story. And I think, to me, that's what's really helped build that sense of community and that sense of sort of belonging.
Yeah, I think the front of house are often not valued enough, because there's this, people think about their association with the teacher, and the teacher is the most valuable part of a studio. And for every teacher who's listening to this, you are a very important part of the studio, but the front of house kind of sets that tone. Like the minute that somebody walks in, if they're not greeted with a smile, and it's got to be genuine, then you don't really have a studio almost. The front of house, they really set the tone for a new person or somebody who's been coming forever walking into the door.
It's part of the experience,
Absolutely.
and I see the clients when they arrive, and in some of the receptions, like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in forever. What happened? Oh, did you hurt yourself? How are you doing? Or you're gonna love this new class, and I can see that those are genuine talks that they have, and that sets the tone for the class and maybe for the day.
Yeah, and also not being pretentious. I think for us it's been about kind of being inclusive and not making, you get every day probably a person that comes in that, hasn't done yoga or Pilates, or, is intimidated or whatever. So I think it's really about that as well, about making those people feel welcome, and, that we're not somehow in a sort of special club that they're not allowed to enter. It's sort of come in, we're not taking ourselves too seriously. You can definitely do some very serious yoga and movement, practice here, but it's not pretentious. And I think that is reflected in the teachers that I, get to work at Down to Earth, but also really much in that sort of reception atmosphere that, come in, it's fine, you don't be intimidated.
Yes. I want to talk about the realities of the economics of a yoga studio, because I don't think people understand it, because we don't talk about it. And one of the purposes of me asking the two of you to come on to this was to start to open up a little bit about it, because it is hard. You have rent, you have rates, you have VAT, 20% of your pound immediately gone right off the bat. Energy bills, those are rising. London living wage, insurance, it just goes on and on and on and on. And I wonder, how do you guys navigate it? Because are you, just about doing it? I don't really know a yoga studio that is minting it right now, because of the costs associated with running it. You cannot pass that on to your customers because they get upset. So how do you draw that fine line between accessibility and commercial reality?
I think that's tough. I think that's the toughest thing. Sort of, it's about, and we've also tried to keep our prices relatively low. I think we're in a sort of part of London where it's by no means not wealthy, but I think that there is a sort of certain ceiling almost that people would pay. So that's been really difficult as well, to try and keep prices realistic to what we feel the local audience would pay, but then also whilst kind of, covering all those costs. And since I left as well, or not left, but since I moved away, also sort of manage, I'd say, staff costs.
Yeah.
That's the biggest, for sure.
Teacher pay?
Teacher pay. I think that the sort of thing that can be a bit, sometimes I think that there's a perception maybe that, studio owners are kind of just sat back on their kind of, velvet sofas kind of, rolling in cash. And I really, I couldn't kind of emphasize enough how much that's not the case, from sort of, I probably haven't had, and this is not like a, poor me thing, but I haven't had my phone not on for the last 12 years. I'd say I probably check my phone all the time. Clearly, it helps to have, the most amazing manager. But, you know, just phone calls at any time of the day, constantly dealing with it, you know, up and down in finances, making decisions, you know, and then you have, you know, obviously the catastrophic thing that you had happen, but other sort of small things that really sort of set you back, where you have kind of, you know, big investment costs into this, that or other. But yeah, it's hard. I think, you know.
Not to mention your personal life. You're a mother. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's definitely not what I think people think it is. It's hard work. Yeah.
No, and also thank you for opening up this topic, because it's definitely not what people think. And I think the margins are really, you know, really slim. There's so much that we have to pay for everything. I think because a lot of the wellness space has now gone digitally, and I think people tend to associate, you know, wellness and yoga. It's like, oh, you know, that class on YouTube or that app. But this is a hospitality business. Like, we have the rent, we have landlords, we have so many things that we have to pay. I think for me personally, coming from the nonprofit world, you know, I've worked for NGOs and charities for many, many years. I'm used to this idea that if you're working for something that you're passionate about, you don't have to be paid too much, because, you know, you're almost paid in the passion and the love that you're having for the work you're doing, charity or doing yoga. And I really disagree with that. You know, I want to pay my teachers the best salary that I can. And to be honest, that's the hardest thing about the fire, is that the financial loss was so big that now it's going to take me so much longer to get to where I want. I'm back to where I was. No, the teachers never got a salary cut or anything like that, but I really actually wanted to raise. Like, I want them, teachers, front of staff, like, I want them to actually be valued for the work that they do. It's not because they work in yoga they don't deserve, you know. They are I have one of the best teachers, you know. I have amazing people, and they spend so much time and money perfecting, you know, their skills and their practice, and that has to be honored in the monetary way as well. Sure. I think that's hard. And the other thing is, you know, there are so many other platforms like ClassPass. Yep. And I think people don't realize how little we get paid. And that's just a reality, you know. It's a different business model, but it allows people to kind of shop around and go to different places. And that's really hard for, you know, the neighborhood studio.
Olivia, what do you think about ClassPass?
So I think it definitely has some, you know, benefits. I think it allows people that maybe go to different locations, maybe because sometimes they want to work out near their home, sometimes they want to work out near their jobs, and, you know, it has a completely different price point, so it allows more people to discover new practices. I think the problem arrives when it starts to replace the studio. So I think it's a great platform to find new places. I would love for people to understand that if you have found your place, then the best thing would be to move into a membership. And I think that's to me, that's the most important thing. It's a great platform to understand, to get to know, but being loyal to your studio is the best way that you can to support that studio and to make sure that that studio will be there 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
But of course, the perpetual problem being the fact that it's cheaper.
Yeah, that's
so
the thing.
I think
it's
it's cheaper, and I think I completely agree with you that we would be expecting that from a student to sort of love their local studio and help sort of ensure that it's there. But it's probably very hard for people to say no, because it can be cheaper. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
And it's the thing, I think, with at least yoga studios are different than other businesses. Obviously we have, you know, our members, and, you know, they pay their membership. But, you know, if one of our members is going through a tough time, we will freeze the membership. We'll give you some free classes. Or, you know, if someone comes and they have depression, or, you know, if you're an NHS worker, like, we have I feel like we need to have those people paying full price so that we can accommodate everyone, and even those people paying full price at certain times of their lives. You know, we will never say no, you know, you can't come here, can't afford it. Like, let's work it out. You know, this is, of course, I want to make a profit because I want to make sure that this is sustainable, but I truly believe that what we're doing is great for people's lives every day. So we need that balance. We need people paying full price exactly because, so that we can open up spaces for people that can't. I hope everyone understands this.
Can we talk about teacher pay for a minute? Because I guess it was round about COVID time, coming out of COVID, or maybe it was pre-COVID, when it was a real subject and teachers were truly not getting paid their worth. I used to hear £20 per hour and that was it, flat rate. I think the industry has very much listened and corrected itself, I would argue. I know the three of us have talked about this before and how we believe it's so important. Does there come a point, though, where it's just not like, it just keeps edging up and up? Like every time I have a price rise, which actually it's only happened twice, I get so much flack from clientele. And I understand why. Nobody wants to see their prices come up. But there's teacher pay, there's, inflation that rises. So how are we supposed to stay ahead of the game as studio owners, where we're rewarding our teachers, but not to the point where the studio just is barely chugging along?
Very tricky. I think it's just really tricky. I mean, we've been so slow as well at kind of putting those prices up. Often as part of my job, I would look at all the other studios and look at, what other people are charging, and I'd often feel like that we could definitely jump to more, and then that would allow us to, also give teachers, in a higher rate. But it's really tricky. I think for us as a model, I feel that we've sort of created a model that I feel like is fair to us, which means that the longer you are with us, the more commitment you give to the studio, if you sort of help with promotion of the studio, that's rewarded. I think the old system where, that's probably always been the case, that people who were sort of, had most experience were rewarded financially. But I think what we're trying to do as well is to sort of turn it to the kind of investment into the studio. So that's kind of rewarded, being committed to down to earth and helping kind of, helping kind of the studio. And it's a tricky one. It's a really tricky one. I think we had a pay rise in some of the memberships last year, and for the first 4 months we were kind of really scared about if we're going to kind of watch the dropout. And we have special sort of sometimes special deals for people who can't afford things if we sort of go higher. And it's tricky. It's really, really tricky. It's that balance that every year we've tried to sort of hit, and I hope that we're hitting it. And I do sort of wake up and go, oh my God, we should go up with some of the prices. And then I change my mind by the weekend, because then I think it could impact us too much. And I don't have a sort of clear answer. I think it's just something that you almost like sort of turn the tap on very slowly. You kind of try it. You try not to make too rapid a change. And then, of course, the big thing is the expansion of so many studios. There are so many studios in London at the moment. So you can't, you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of, you have to stay competitive. It is. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
I don't have a clear answer either. I think, because I used to have another studio as a part of a franchise, so the paying model was not up to me. So when I opened Sahna, that was the first thing. Is like, okay, I really need to sit down and make sure that everyone is paid fairly. Because, of course, you want to reward experience. But sometimes I would also have, more junior teachers that were really working so hard and doing all the trainings. And you could see that they were learning the classes. And, I was like, well, that should be rewarded too. And, when you think about bonuses, okay, but then I create, and also I think because of kind of my past, I've done research, I'm very kind of data driven. So it's like, okay, we'll pay bonuses, but like, what's the fair way? Because I cannot pay the same bonus to someone that has a class on a Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to someone that has a class on a Thursday at 11 a.m. Because, I can put kind of anyone on a Saturday, 9:30 a.m. and I'm going to have 30 people. So I have my whole thing. I have my spreadsheets that I have all my numbers, and I try to make it as fair as possible. But I'm also very honest with my teachers. It's like, let me know. What can we do if you work in any other studios and you have had any kind of different pay structures that you think work best, let me know. Let's talk about it. I'm very open about that. I think the reality is what we sell, quote unquote, is our product, is the yoga. And the teacher is a crucial, essential part of that. So I think they have to be happy. They have to be happy to be there, and they have to understand that their time is valued and that we value that. So that is a non-negotiable. With the clients is, again, going back to we hope they understand that we have all those other costs, and not everyone does. Some people complain, oh, but why do I have to pay for a mat? I'm like, well, because the mat costs. Cleaning a mat after a hot yoga class costs a lot of money and time. And, Jenny, we had conversation, what's the best way to clean? What do you use? Like, there's so much involved after every little act that happens in the studio that, unfortunately, it costs money.
Yeah. I mean, all these questions that we talk about, have you ever had moments where you question whether the model still works?
Yeah. Yes. I think it would be silly not to question, ourselves. And I think especially when you see big gyms that are, they have the sauna, they have the spa, they have the pool, they have the classes, they have the weights, and now they have the yoga and the hot yoga. And you're like, how am I going to compete with that? I think you question yourself. And for me, so far, I think we still have that identity, that soul, that community, that's something special that you wouldn't get anywhere else. 10 years from now, we'll have to talk again and see.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I believe in the model. I do. We're here sort of 12 years later, and I think we must be doing something right. I feel like that... occasionally I look at trends, and recently we have this sort of Pilates reformer trend, and then you sort of sit down and you analyze that and you think about, should I buy a bunch of reformers, and is this the direction to go in, or and I just believe you've got to watch those trends for sure. You've got to watch what people want. So, for example, for us recently, we've gotten more into strength, because that's really what people are interested in, obviously, as well as retaining all our mat Pilates and all our yoga. But if something's not working, if certain sort of yoga classes or yoga, styles are not working, you've just got to kind of stop those. So the model is kind of flexible, it's sort of, it's there. The basics have to be there for us. It's the reception. It's keeping our prices relatively affordable because of where we are geographically. So that's got to hold. We've got to have good teachers. And, fundamentally, we're a yoga and Pilates studio. But, we are definitely going to potentially mold the model a little bit, change with whatever's happening, and where we can adapt, if it works for us physically, and we've obviously got space limitations. So I'd say I believe in the model. I am happy with where we're at. I'm very I'm grateful that we're here 12 years later. But yeah, it's always possible to sort of adapt and change, and yeah.
London, sorry.
No, I think it's a combination of, exactly as you're saying, like you have to give people what they want, and also kind of give them what they need as well. Kind of slip in there, because definitely see the strength kind of trend, like people, especially women, and women over 40, like they want the strength, they want the weights, they want that mobility. I think, we know we're living longer and we want our bodies to accompany us through this longer journey. But also, once they're there, I was like, yeah, yoga can give you a lot of strength as well. Because also helping people understand how to work with their bodies. And because sometimes what they have in their minds is not necessarily, it's like you don't necessarily just have to do weights to get stronger. You can get stronger through different ways. So it's a combination of understanding the trends and talking to them and giving what's necessary.
You guys had preempted my question, which was that London has massively changed in the past, I'd say recently, in the past 2 years, the interest with reformer Pilates, with strength, and, yoga is maybe people are moving a little bit away from it. And, we are steadfastly holding on to it because we believe in it as a practice. So I'm trying to figure out, why have we seen this change? Why have we seen people become obsessed with reformer Pilates and strength training?
Sometimes I think it's generational. I'm in my sort of late 40s. I kind of think a lot of that sort of reformer Pilates, there's a lot of sort of younger generation driving that change through social media, through how they consume exercise, how they, it's very much part of the lifestyle. It's sort of the reformer class, or the drink they consume afterwards, or, and then the way they show, there are occasionally elements of what's happening right now that I feel kind of slightly almost detached from, because it's not necessarily the experience I'm having. I'm probably going to relate more to the kind of strength training and all of that I feel that my body needs right now. But the change, enormous change. I feel like it's sort of... one of the biggest things that I feel have happened for us, because we were originally, whenever I thought about Down to Earth, it really was about having a sort of neighborhood studio, about having a small neighborhood studio that, we would kind of cater for that local thing. That's become the norm now. That's just, there's a studio on every corner. And I do actually love that. I love the fact that there are so many studios. That does make it harder to survive, but it's great that because more people are doing, more people are exercising, or more people are doing that form of exercise. But it's also about kind of differentiating: is this a trend? Is this going to last? Is this sustainable? There are so many Pilates reformer studios. Do we have enough teachers to sustain this model? Is it safe? So it's for us, it's sort of, like I said a bit before, it's about following the trend but sticking to your guns and going, this is what we do, we must do this, as well as we can, and pay attention to detail and stick to this, rather than kind of just go, oh, everyone's doing this now, let's just completely change our concept. Because
I think, so what I see in our studio, so we have, at Sahna, we have high intensity interval training, Pilates, and we have Sculpt, so kind of yoga with weights. And those two are absolutely blowing up. Like, people want that. And I think they want that instant gratification that you get from, you're in a hot room, you're sweating, you have weights. Like, there's no denying that you're working yourself, so hard. I think people like that. I think a lot of people are using different kind of iWatches and tracking. That kind of really powerful class gives you that instance, like, yes, I burned this many calories and I worked this hard, and and kind of now I can go about my day, kind of like I've checked that box fully. Whereas I think a yoga, more classic, you do your kind of vinyasa practice. I think you can work extremely hard, but it might not give you that instant feeling that you've done that much. I think it takes time to understand how sometimes those classes are actually much harder. So I think it's a bit about the instant gratification, the seeing the sweat, you see those mats and you feel like you've done something. Because at the end of the day, those people, besides, if you're not doing it at home, right? Like, we could all be doing yoga and mat Pilates at home with a YouTube. So the fact that you actually go into the studio and doing something means that you have that extra drive. So I think they might want to see that extra reward in a way.
I think also sort of sometimes I think we've been seeing some faces at the studio for sort of years and years, and maybe they get to a point where they want to try other things, Mission is obviously offers all sorts of different movement, and I feel that, that's okay. People are just wanting to do different things throughout the day, and we've got to sort of allow that, I think, that there's you've definitely got to change, move with the times, for sure.
So do you think that independent studios have a future in London, or are we moving toward a market that's dominated by bigger brands and fitness groups?
I feel definitely there's future, for sure. I think there's always future for independent anything, for independent coffee shops, for independent studios, now more than ever. I think, back when we opened, I then would have questioned it, whether it would have worked as a model, whether people would have believed the kind of local studio enough, or whether they needed to go to a sort of bigger studio to feel validated. But I think there's absolutely people like small, people like local, people like independent, I think people like a story as well. And, with all of us, there's a sort of story behind a brand and a belief, and you can't replicate that. I think you can't, I should say that we opened a second studio in Islington just before COVID in 2019. And I'm sort of very grateful for that, because we kind of scratched that itch. There was this sort of thing where you get very excited about the studio and you think like, oh, I can do this again. This is, this is fantastic. It's going to be the same. And then, of course, it's not the same. It's like just a lot more work. But I definitely feel, for me, that there's always space for independent.
I think, having lived in different places, I think especially in a city like London, 100%. I think there's so much identity and individualities and character in this city. Like, I feel that you're always going to have people that want their thing, their community, their place, their unique studio. So yes, I do believe that.
It's what you said earlier. You can't please everybody. Of course, you're going to lose certain people. You're going to lose people who want to go to the gym or who want to, go swimming or whatever it is, things that we can't give them. But there will always be a kind of person that appreciates also the aesthetic. Like, I haven't been to Sahna, I've been to Mission, and, Down to Earth, we also try to sort of, look a certain way. Yeah. And I think there are certain... What you can't replicate certain things, I think that if that care and that attention to detail, you can't.
100%. Yeah. I it's interesting when you're saying that because we had to move, so now we're in a different space. It's a bit of it's a dead end street, and then the idea is like, okay, when you arrive here and you enter this gate, it's like, okay, this is your safe space. You're fine, you're calm, you're mindful, you're peaceful, and then you can go on about your day in chaotic city. But yeah.
Well, I consider myself honored that I'm sitting in this group with you, because we're 3 female entrepreneurs who are heading yoga businesses. Yeah. And I think, we're seeing more women come into the forefront here. And long may that happen, because for a long time it has been run by men. And, I think we've kind of sat on the sidelines waiting, and now is our time. And I think you guys are incredibly thoughtful, and you know what you're doing, and you've overcome incredible obstacles. And I'm grateful to you, and congratulations for getting to where
Genny.
You are.
Likewise, thank you.
And thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about that side of the business as well. Thank you.
It's important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.